Hi, yeah, Aaron Dade here again, and I'm hearing lots of questions about the 7 stages that I talked about in the last video. And my wife is adamant that I bring out examples and conversation about the stages. So we're going to start with the identification stage today, and I'm going to do one each video to really explain it thoroughly so people really understand what's happening. And this isn't something that I can just come up with off the top of my head. I really have to spend intimate time with God so I understand exactly what I'm telling people, because I don't want to tell people the wrong information or the wrong thing. This isn't just something that came to me and I deciphered it myself. This was really very specific about how to really see these stages and how to deal with them. So again, we're going to start with the identification stage, and I really want to tie a verse to this. And it's in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 15. And it says, "What is happening now has happened before and will happen in the future has happened before, because God makes the same things happen over and over again." And the identification stage really has to do with what has happened in your past that is relatable to your future. And you see this all the time with couples and with spousal relationships, marriages, however you want to say it. But you see this frequently in relationships with people. The things that have happened in their past past have brought up different issues in their future or in their present. You know, you can see those things that happened in their past that create soul wounds or soul ties, however you want to use that word, but it creates an atmosphere where you're bleeding on your spouse, you're bleeding on your children, you're constantly bleeding from the soul wound. So what happened has happened before. And so when you're thinking of identification, it's really thinking outside of the box. It's not the normal, I deal with everybody like this, so I'm just going to look at things this way. It's really, I'm identifying what is going wrong in my relationships and my environment, and how I deal with people, how I speak to people, how I treat people, how I treat myself, because how you treat yourself will be a reflection on how you treat other people. You will either treat them opposite the way you treat yourself, or you will treat them the same the way that you treat yourself. However, there is a strong positive or negative correlation. So when you're looking at the identification stage, you identify, is there a bitterness in how I treat people in my relationships or how I treat myself? Is there anger in how I treat myself or in relationships? Is there sadness in how I treat myself or in relationships? What actual emotional trait is tied to how I treat myself and how I deal with other relationships? And then taking it a step further, where does that correlate in my past? Was there something that happened with my mother, father, cousins, brother, etc.? Anybody really in your environment that's been there for a long time. I've seen this before where it's been even friends. 25 years ago, they violated you in some way, and now it's relevant in your present. You're violating everybody else around you the same way, or you treat everybody else different than the way that person treated you. However, there is a positive or negative correlation, as I stated before. You have to really look at your past with an unbiased eye. I'm not looking at this as, I like it or love it. It's just a fact. This is something that happened. In my past, my real DNA father took off. He decided it wasn't important enough to him. And that didn't bother me. It was just, to be honest, I was really indifferent to his existence. It didn't really, I have a father. I love my father, and to me, he's just a guy. Now, this wasn't a problem for me necessarily, but in the identification stage, I noticed then with emotions, that's how I would deal with people. Is positive or negative, I was really just kind of indifferent. Like, this is cool or it's not, no matter what the expression on my face was, I really was just kind of indifferent to the relationships that I had with people. Now moving this into my relationship with my spouse, When she does something really nice for me, I'm just kind of like, oh, well, that's great. Thanks. I appreciate it. However, it does not acknowledge that she took her own time and spent her own time, separated her time out of her day to do something nice for me, and I'm just kind of indifferent to it. Like, and that's a big deal. That bothers her. And that's completely logical that it bothers her, but that was part of before my restoration that I really had to identify, why is that a problem? Like, why do I act like that? Why am I indifferent to most of any relationships? Why am I indifferent? And it was because I just taught myself that way. Ever since that really happened, I was just like, good or bad, whatever happens. And some of those things, like analyzing financial markets, it makes you great. You can make unbiased decisions all the time. However, when it comes to relationships with people that involve emotions, it makes you not so great. Because then when they do good things or when they do bad things, you're just indifferent. It just really doesn't matter to you. So then, your children who need your acknowledgement constantly, they constantly need your reassurance, your acknowledgement, you to be emotionally available. And for a very long time, I wasn't. I just was like, okay, whatever happens, happens. No big deal. However, it is a big deal, especially to your children. And if you don't have children, to your spouse. If you don't have a spouse, prepare to have one. I speak to people about this all the time. Oh, well, I don't have a spouse or I don't have children. Well, just because you don't have children or you don't have a spouse doesn't mean you don't affect other people in your environment. So you need to prepare like you're going to have a spouse. Prepare like you're going to have children. If it's beyond that period of time, prepare like the people around you that have children, because one day they will need your advice. I bring this up when I speak to men and I mentor to men all the time. And they're like, well, I don't have kids right now. And I'm like, well, and actually another woman, when I was talking to my wife, when we were mentoring to her, okay, well, if Aaron's sister never said to him, hey, you are actually our brother, so there is no Moses. Then if she doesn't do that, there is no Moses. So, just because she could have easily said, well, I don't have a brother anymore. He's king or whatever, or prince or whatever, However, she made it very apparent, no, you are our brother. It does matter. It is important. And so when you look at your relationships, this is very important and very intricate. There are intricate details, It's very important in the identification stage that you realize that just because you're not a parent or you're not a spouse yet doesn't mean that it's not important, that you don't matter. Now, if you do have a spouse or you do have children, to understand the identification stage is really, there's a lot of I don't know in there. Well, why is it that your husband or your wife does this, your spouse does this, and it bothers you, but you don't set any healthy boundaries? Why does that happen? Well, I don't know. Well, that's the identification stage. And after you go through these stages, eventually you're going to be going through them so much where it just becomes habit. Okay, I need to know why this is happening, because otherwise it's going to happen over and over. God is not going to let you go further until you fix that, because you're not ready for what comes next. So you really have to understand that this process is consistent. You're always working on yourself. You're always trying to improve yourself. As Christ said, carry your cross every day. There are many, many different examples. Paul in his last words where he was like, we're always working on ourselves. It's never a situation where we've arrived, until you make it to heaven, you haven't really actually arrived. So I really encourage people in the identification stage to really look at their past with an unbiased eye. That means I'm looking at it where it's not like, I don't want to talk about that. This doesn't matter. I don't see why this makes a difference. Well, it does make a difference, because it talks about how you deal with your present, how you deal with your future right now. It talks about what you do right now and what you're going to do in your future. Until you get past it, then it's just going to be the same thing over and over and over again, as we saw in Ecclesiastes. So again, I want people to be very adamant about identifying the things that are going on with themselves. And then really, the identification stage is really about you, identifying with you. Because a lot of times when we mentor to women or men, couples, even people that don't have couples, a lot of times it's how you deal with your children. And that sounds kind of bad, but it's not. It's just relatable that way. When my kids do something wrong, it's always, oh, my brother did this or my sister did that or that. Well, what did you actually do? What does this have to do with you? I know they may have did this or they may have done that. I get that, but what did you do? Like, where is your part to play in this? Because you did something, you had a part to play in it, and where is it? And then when you get down to that, then you can understand, okay, well, you did this for this reason. Because if you look at most of your relationships, that's how you deal with them, And so I think that in the identification stage, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a ton about yourself. I learned that I am good at math because I'm indifferent. I'm good at they're all equations to me. 1 + 1 = 2. Or you throw a variable in there, or you throw an angle in there, but they're all just equations to me with a given result. And relationships are not like that. They're complicated. They're complex. They have emotions in them, especially women. They express things externally, and so when they're expressing things externally, and you add emotions, it's no longer 1 + 1 = 2. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on in the midst of that, and that's just women. Men, since we think about things internally, we're not, we're not the ones that are gonna just come out and just start talking about every emotion that we've ever experienced. This is part of that identification stage, because a lot of times with the identification stage, it's going to be one little piece at a time. It's not going to be all at once. They talk about, oh, my mommy didn't hug me enough, or I didn't get enough conversations with my dad, or I didn't get enough clothes when I was growing up, or I had way too much stuff when I was growing up. I was only a child. They're not going to, especially men, are not going to talk about this all at once. That's just not going to happen. You have to break it up into sections. And so it starts with that identification stage, and then eventually you're going to end up hitting that several times over and over and over. And the next video will go over into the acceptance stage, where you accept that challenge. You understand this is something that I'm dealing with on a consistent basis, and you accept that challenge of actually moving forward. Let's start trying to heal this. But I just wanted to spend some time explaining the first stage of the 7 stages, just so everybody kind of understood. One, that this was not my idea; it was his idea. This was him. I didn't know anything about any of those things, or the 4 steps to listening, which I can go into at another time. But hey, yeah, guys, this is my video, and my name's Dade. I'll talk to you guys soon.